Walking Each Other Home is an exploration of the many ways we cultivate wisdom, compassion, and love in our lives. Mirabai Bush talks with some of her many diverse friends about what they're learning now from their spiritual paths and practices. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/Mirabai.
Okay, good.
I was ready.
I'm so glad. Well, welcome everyone. Elizabeth just asked me who the audience is, and I told her I have no idea. But I'm happy you're all here. And I know many of you will be people I know because you're going to want to hear Elizabeth. Elizabeth Lesser is the author of several best-selling books, including Cassandra Speaks, When Women Are the Storytellers, The Human Story Changes. That is such a great title. I love it. And the book is beautiful. We're going to talk about it later. Broken Open, How Difficult Times Can Help Us Grow, and Marrow, which I read more than once. I loved that book about your sister, Love, Loss, and What Matters Most. She's the co-founder of Omega Institute, which offers workshops and conferences in wellness, spirituality, creativity, and social change. She's given 2 popular TED Talks and is one of Oprah Winfrey's SuperSoul 100, a collection of 100 leaders who are using their voices and talent to elevate humanity. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mirabai. Oh, dear friend.
I was just going to say, that's your bio, but we have a kind of overlapping bio also, a long history. This is what I was thinking of. Pir Vilayat Khan, who I met with Ram Dass on the way home from India in London. And of course, Omega, which was founded in 1977, and the early Ram Dass retreats there with the bonfires. And then being on the board, which I loved. And I was remembering some of the New York conferences and how amazing they seemed at the time in the beginning. And how one time I had to fill in for Abdulaziz Saeed, who couldn't get there. And I came out, people were somewhat disappointed.
And confused. They
and confused.
Abdulaziz Saeed, who is looks like Omar Sharif.
Yes. And then the Ram Dass Library and the Sanctuary. Anyhow, I remembered those things. I wonder what you remember.
I remember so many things. I remember, maybe because I just wrote this book, which is about women, I remember you and I often being the only women who were leaders in these circles of spirituality, psychology, and kind of often having eye-rolling moments with you and moments of just sort of unspoken understanding. And also because both you and I are organizing types. I like things organized. And I know, like, we both run large organizations. You need to be organized. And then often you and I were herding the same cats, trying to keep people on schedule. And lunch starts at 12. That means you need to end at 12. And being kind of disrespected, but nonetheless having to do our thing.
Yes. So good. Well, also, reading your book, which I just so loved, and thinking about, the early times of gathering women together. I remember doing a whole series with Vicki Noble of women's retreats there at Omega.
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago, and they were wonderful. Yeah. So what I want this podcast series to be is a celebration of the many ways in which we seek And, oh, I didn't say this, but your first book, which I still remember you writing, is called A Seeker's Guide. And so that's how I was thinking of the podcast series from the beginning, thinking about the many ways in which everybody seeks for meaning, for truth, for spirit, for home. And the first episode I told you was with John Densmore, who had just published a book called The Seekers, about people who inspired him along the way, seeking home. He said a great thing in that interview, which was that the first sound you hear is the sound of your mother's heartbeat in the womb. And so he said he thought that's why he became a drummer. But he also said about the womb, he said it's the ultimate homeland security.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, and I loved what you said in Cassandra. I think of my deeper self as my home. I remember Maharaji used to say, the whole world is my home. And I was thinking about Omega was an external home that you created where people could seek in the early days when there weren't very many places where you could do it. So let's talk, since your latest book is about women in power, and you've brought together many women over the years in the Women's Leadership Institute and programs called Women in Power. Could you just start by sharing some of what you learned, maybe some of what surprised you, or some important moments in the unfolding of all of that?
Yes. When one's core seeking is about a home where distinctions fall apart and we are all one, dicing it up into women it's kind of like, why are you doing that?
Yep.
But at the same time, I like the way Eckhart Tolle says we are human beings. We are human, and there's all sorts of stuff that goes along with that. Ultimately, we're beings, but at the moment, we're humans. And there are interesting things that happen in our human life that keep us from finding home. And sometimes for women, it's very different than it is for men. So yes, we're all heading to the same home. In fact, we already are there, but there are these veils that keep us from knowing how to be at home in our bodies, in our relationships, in the earth, in the cosmos. Mm-hmm. And after a while, being a wife, married to men, not at the same time, two marriages simultaneously.
I understand.
Having sons, working primarily in leadership with men, so many of the teachers coming to Omega, men. I'd always been a feminist. I was raised by a feminist. I was raised in a family of 4 daughters, my mother, my grandmother, my great aunt, and my father. And my father ruled the roost. And for some reason, even as a little girl, I was the identified troublemaker in the family. It was like, wait a second, there's like 7 of us women and 1 man. Why don't we get a say? What's going on here? And I was the one who would stand up to my sisters and to my father, and my sisters were always embarrassed about me. Any event, I brought that same spirit into the work world, and very similar things were going on. And one thing I have organized hundreds of conferences over the years at Omega, whether they've been in wellness or cancer or poetry or environmental activism. One year, and I often use like, what are we going to do a conference on this year? What's making people disturbed in the culture? Like if I was putting one together now, it would be probably about race or about climate change or about how do we learn something from the pandemic. But about 20 years ago, I began to feel in my own self and in the culture, when you put the two words women and power together, people get uncomfortable. I got uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want to be powerful. I don't want power. I don't like power. Women aren't supposed to want power. Ooh, power. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm just going to ask the question, what do we feel about power as women? Can we do it differently? If we get it, do we just turn into the same people that we don't want to turn into? So I invited a few teachers. For the first conference, I invited Anita Hill, who was still an important figure in the forefront of the culture from having been involved in the Clarence Thomas hearings for the Supreme Court. I invited Eve Ensler, who was the author of the Vagina Monologues and the founder of V-Day, and Iana Levan-Zant. These and we many of us know their names, but putting these specific people together was kind of strange. And I was surprised several hundred people came, which was a lot I thought, for something like, how do you feel about women and power in your life and in the world? And it just was on fire. It was amazing. And so we did it again and again. And by like the fourth year, we did it in New York City. There were 2,000 women from around the world. And one year, I called it Women, Power, and Peace. And we had every Nobel Peace Prize winner who was a woman. And you might, how did you fit them all? Well, there were only 5.
Right.
And 2 of them weren't allowed out of their countries, one from Iran and one from Myanmar. And so there were 3. And we paired them with other women who were trying to use their power to bring about peace. And you asked me what surprised me. In that one, what's her name? Jody Williams, who had won the prize for banning landmines as a weapon of war. She had gone to these countries, stood up to warlords, walked across fields where they said, don't walk there, there are landmines. And she'd be like, well, I'm going to walk anyway until you promise me you're going to get rid of them. And she would risk her life. And she was being interviewed on stage by Pat Mitchell, who was head of PBS at the moment. And Pat said, so where does your power come from? And she says, I don't have power. I don't like power. I don't want power. And Pat kept pushing it, saying, but you walk across fields with landmines. That's kind of powerful. No, power is corrupting. I don't want power. And I realized then that somehow we had to get across the idea to women and men. There was another way to do power. Power is just wanting to express your authentic, alive chi in the world. Power does not have to come at the expense of other people's power. How are we going to teach that kind of power? And also, do women have a more natural connection to that kind of shared power? And that's really why I wrote Cassandra Speaks, because that all my years of leading that conference gave me some ideas about it.
It's so good. And what one thing I loved about it is that it combines social awareness and action for change with the inner life and practice and to different kinds of power that way. How that deepening the inner vision helps us be better activists, and also how working for change develops our inner vision. Not so many people really get that, understand it as subtly as you do. You want to say something about that?
Yeah. Well, I made up a word to try to figure out how to get that idea across. I call it Innervism. There's activism and Innervism. I wanted a word that wasn't like contemplative practice, which I love. It's one of my favorite phrases, thanks to you. But I wanted a word that had kind of like muscle, like, because my my whole interest is detaching the word powers and leadership from the word warrior and hero, this sense that to be powerful, you have to somehow follow the hero's journey that involves violence and control and risking your life. Like, I'm interested in heroes who are soft at heart, who are caring, who want to change the world through love and community. And the reason I feel spiritual practice has to be part of that is because, like, for years at Omega, we have brought activists and like organizations, whether they're working for peace or social justice or the environmental realm, and given them free access to a week at Omega where they can have their board meetings, use, a lot of the inner technologies that you and I know so well, meditation, yoga, healing. And we did that because we noticed that so many people in the social justice world are angry and stressed out and they're not running their organizations along the same lines that they envision the world. It's just like the contrast is so tragic that we thought, well, let's help people who are doing the work on the ground to transform the world, transform themselves at the same time so they don't burn out, so they don't hurt each other. So that is why I feel combining meditation, physical healing work, and especially for women who are working in the field of ending violence against women, working on our own sense of body and sex and coming home to our bodies, which we often aren't at home in because we either have been hurt, so we have a lot of boundaries up that keep us from having a luscious experience of being embodied.
Yes. We can stop now. But I have more questions. The pandemic. The pandemic has revealed, just as you've been saying, some of the weaknesses in the fabric of society, some of the systems that led to millions of people getting this virus and dying. And I mean, I think it's more obvious than ever that when we don't build programs and systems based on love, that we cause harm. And I want to think about, and I can tell you're thinking about it, how we go forward, how we learn from this. There was a lot to be learned in this. How we go forward, creating new systems and directions that lead to a more compassionate, wise, sane, caring society. In 2011, you gave a TED Talk called Take the Other to Lunch. I think it needs to be reissued, although I know there's no such thing anymore as reissuing. Everything's out there forever. But a call for negotiating our differences as humans. So what are you thinking now about going forward? I'm sure you're having a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. I'm sure the way we'll go forward is the way we always go forward as people, like bumpily,
bumpily,
sometimes wisely. I'm very hopeful. I'm also like, oh God, probably when this is over, we'll just go back to basically the way we were. But on the other hand, a lot of amazing stuff has happened during the pandemic. And not only during, but because of. I think a lot of the power of the Black Lives Matter movement, of the Me Too movement, of really finally looking at climate change as real and critical. I think the pandemic has only given that a sharper edge because, in one of my books, Broken Open, I describe the way we learn individually as the Phoenix process, where we have to have some sort of trauma happen before we can burn what's old and wants to burn in the fire so that the new Phoenix bird in us can arise. And I do think new things are arising. And I'm a incurable optimist. I'd probably, I'll just always be like that. So I think the pandemic, which has brought so much suffering, will also bring a lot of liberation and insight and change. And I think it's up to each one of us to make sure it happens in our own life, first of all. That's to me where the hardest work is. For me, I can talk a good game about love and oneness and then observe how I treat my husband, or that I don't recycle, things like that. So it's like really doing the work in my own life always is the most important thing to me. Am I being loving, kind? Am I practicing loving kindness with the people closest to me?
Yeah.
If I can pull that off, I think that's probably more important than any book I write or school I find, just being a decent, awake, luminous being as I walk through my small world. That's a good place to start. And I think the pandemic is going to have that effect on many, many people. Do I need to travel? Do I really need to get in a plane and burn so much carbon? Do I need to do that? No, I didn't do it for a year, so I don't need to do that. Do I need to, the way I eat, the way I work, the way we do meetings, I think things are going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so much. You started out saying that you're hopeful. And as you know, I'm an optimist as well and always hopeful. But, it's been hard through this. And it's hard for a lot of people having hope for the future.
What? I'll never forget one of the first retreats Ram Dass did at Omega. This was before we were on our campus in Rhinebeck. This was in New Lebanon, New York.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it was during social justice work called the Nuclear Freeze Movement.
Oh, right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of concerts for it. There was a lot of talk about it, a lot of work on trying to freeze the production and use of nuclear armaments. And so there were about 300 or 400 people in this big room with Ram Dass, and Ram Dass is talking about meditation and other realms of being and putting down our stories and living in oneness. And all of a sudden, this woman raises her hand and she becomes more and more agitated as she's speaking. I can't believe we're sitting here as nuclear weapons are proliferating. And one day it's like somebody's going to push that button and there's going to be this big mushroom cloud and we're all going to die together. And Ram Dass puts his hand up and he goes that sounds wonderful.
Oh, God.
I mean, we'll all go up together in a big, beautiful cloud and we'll be one. And she got very upset. I think she huffed off. But most of us got the point he was making, which is we don't really ultimately know what's going on here. We don't know why things are happening. Maybe COVID is a shamanic force come to wake up the world. You don't want to say that to someone who's just lost their grandmother.
Yeah.
But we don't know. I remember Terence McKenna, another brilliant teacher, at Omega, saying something like, why would you worry? Worry is a form of hubris. Worry is a form of hubris. You presume to know what's going on here. So to me, that's another form of innervism that goes with our activism. Yes, be passionate, be angry, be wildly committed to your cause, and you don't know. Both.
Yeah. That was one of the, first things that seemed clear. That combined with how we are all interconnected. Who knew? Even though I knew a number of epidemiologists, from Save a Foundation.
Yes, Larry, brilliant.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So they've been talking about this for ever since the end of smallpox. And so intellectually, I knew that this was possible, but I certainly never thought it was going to happen, really. But one day I thought, oh my God, a bat bit a pangolin, which I'd never heard of before, in China, in Wuhan, which I hadn't heard of either. And everything changed on the whole planet. Right? That was so amazing. I mean, we are all interconnected, and we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, like we can say, the butterfly effect. It sounds lovely when it's a butterfly flapping its wings. Well, when it's a bat biting a pangolin, it's the same deal.
That was stunning to me. Then I was thinking, I loved that you told the Pandora story in the book about she opens the box and everything comes out. And mostly that's the part of the story that has endured, but what you also said was the one thing she kept in the box and closed up so it wouldn't be lost, was hope. And I love that. And I earlier, before COVID, I was doing an event for Brother David. He is turning 93, and he had given all his paraphernalia, his intellectual property to University of Massachusetts. So we were doing an event on social change and spirituality and so on. And so, but before we did it on stage, we were talking to him, and he was saying, he felt so bad about the way the world was now. And so someone said, do you mean you don't have hope? And he said, oh yeah, I have hope. What does hope mean to you? He said, hope means the ability to be surprised.
That's so lovely.
So there's always that we don't know. And we will be surprised by what happens. But that's great. What do you think? Have you thought about specifically or generally what women in particular have to offer to this rebuilding this world, how we live now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's another thing that COVID has shown. I've always wondered from the time I was a kid in elementary school when we were learning history, why was it always about the dates of battles and the names of wars? And why does General Sherman be on a golden horse at the beginning of Central Park? And because he fought this, and why is it always about the warriors?
He burned down my great-grandfather's farm.
Okay. And he also actually was the curator of bringing Native Americans into...
Yes, he was.
And his way of doing it, of forcing them off their lands and into reservations, was to kill all the buffalo. So, and then he's the hero on a golden horse. I once said aloud in an event and people thought it was bizarre, why don't we have like a woman with her legs spread wide giving birth to a baby? We have men being, stabbed by bayonets and holding their bloody brothers. Why don't we have a woman giving birth? Oh, that's so gross and bloody. Like, yeah. So my point is, I think COVID is showing that the care economy, the people who are in our hospitals, the home health aides, the teachers, these are the heroes. I am so grateful for firemen and policemen. I'm not putting them down, but I'm interested in a new kind of first responder. I would like us to start calling elementary school teachers first responders. First responders, because they get there first, and try to raise beautiful citizens, or nurses, or the women who take care of our older parents so tenderly, carefully. These are my heroes, and I would like women to stand tall and firm and strong in our pride about what we do, so that it receives the muscle and clout that it deserves, and money and priority, so that a home health aide could say, I'm a first responder.
Oh, I love that. The care economy. I actually haven't heard that phrase before.
Yeah, that's Ai-jen Poo. Do you know Ai-jen?
Yeah.
Who is, and her whole crew of people who are trying to unionize women who clean houses and hotels and home health aides, because they're so poorly treated, poorly paid, and under cared for as they're caring for us. It's the care economy.
I love that. It's really great. Do you have any insight? I would refer to your TED Talk that you did around taking the other to lunch, but people keep asking how we can bridge this divide. Do you have any? It doesn't have to be new thoughts, but some suggestion for people about that.
Oh my goodness, this is the big work. I thought it was big work when I gave that TED Talk.
Yeah.
10 years ago or something, because that was when the Tea Party was just blossoming in the culture, and it seemed like there was the rise of Fox News and people were getting different facts. But now it's so I know it's happened before in the world. We shouldn't act like this is the first time this has ever happened. There are cultures where the government absolutely controls the press. Now we know why a free and fair press is so critical. We are learning this. If there is two different sets of facts, it's very hard to take the other to lunch and have a conversation. It's hard, but it's not impossible, and it's even more important. And what I mean by that is, we talk about diversity, especially if we're semi-woke people or, progressives. And we think of diversity as like, liberation and freedom and equity for all races, all sexualities, all nationalities. But when it comes to diversity of opinions, we have to understand that there's always going to be people who believe differently than us. And that does not make them bad or wrong. There are many ways we want to all get to the same place. If you were to talk to someone, not a QAnon nutcase, but if you were to talk to someone who's a Republican, I'm assuming most people listening here aren't, but maybe you are. They're awesome, excellent people with a different point of view of how to get to a place where families are well provided for, everyone's safe, and we have clean drinking water and air we can breathe. People go, check, check, check. I want all of that. How we get there, it's just a different opinion. And I'm just as disturbed now by the way the left is demonizing the right as the way the right is demonizing the left. So in our small circles, your uncle who doesn't believe in global warming, or your next door neighbor who has a sign on her lawn for a different political person, saying to that person, can we have tea? Can we go to lunch? It's harder now with COVID, but soon, eventually. I don't want to change your opinion, and I don't want you to try to change mine. I just want to fall in love with you as a person, so that if anything bad ever happened, we'd have each other's back. That's the goal. That's the goal. And intelligent people can pull this off. We just have to, this is where meditation is so helpful, interrupting knee-jerk voices. Bad person. I don't agree. Not my tribe. Just interrupting that monkey mind that categorizes people as good and bad. Finding some equanimity inside and approaching somebody from that space. It's almost magic. In most cases, somebody will be like, wow, cool, I'll do that. Yes, I will do that.
I like that. Yeah, there's a lot of that needs to happen for sure. Yeah.
Not the final answer, but I'm looking at this quote right now. I have this bucket of quotes, and I pick one every day to move
Yes.
my day. I live my day by
So
it.
cool.
And this one I added the other day. President Joseph Biden said it during his inauguration speech, and it makes me feel we can do this. We can transform the world. He said, through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifices, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward, and we can do that now. And that thing, enough of us, instead of thinking all of us have to get there.
Yeah. Huh.
That gives me hope.
It's a good book title.
Enough of us, right?
Well, I want to ask you, but it's a big subject, but you can just say yes or no. Have you been thinking and talking within this incredible network of women about women and aging?
I interviewed the author Isabel Allende the other night. She has a new book out called The Soul of a Woman. And I'd say a third of it is about aging. It's a very small book. It is a beautiful, wonderful book. I highly recommend it to everyone, women, men, any gender, any age. And I think about women and aging all the time. You know why I'm a woman and I'm aging?
I know it was kind of a ridiculous question.
No, it's a beautiful question. In fact, I've been actually thinking maybe because I'm crazy and I keep writing books, even though writing books are so hard, I'm thinking maybe that'll be my next book. Not necessarily women and aging, just spirit and aging, because there's so much room for spiritual practice as we age, because everything that's just sort of theoretical when you're younger is like right in front of you, whether it's the decrepitude of the body or death, or the biggest thing for me is having to let go of who we thought we were. Like I told you before we started taping, my grandson wanted me to teach him to ski. I knew I shouldn't go. I absolutely knew. It wasn't even intuition. It was like, I have bad knees. I've had knee surgery. Do not do it. But there's a part of me, not just I want to please my grandson. It's like, screw that. I am skiing. I grew up skiing. It's my happy place. I am doing it. Well, I really hurt my knee. I probably need surgery again. Skiing, when my little grandson fell on me getting off the chairlift. So to not just be careful, Isabel talks in her book about this fine line between not turning, not fossilizing and becoming a scared, feeble person, staying risky and on the edge and full of life as long as you can, but at the same time, realizing I cannot do what I used to do, and being graceful and grateful about it. Like, I remember once Oprah said, somebody said to her, like, do you tell people how old you are? She was like, well, why wouldn't I? Well, because you don't really want to ever get to that age. And she was like, I've lost so many friends who never got to be 60, 65, 70, 80. Like, every year is a gift. I want to live like that. It's hard. And it requires giving up aspects of myself and welcoming in other ones.
Yeah. I just add one. I agree with it all, of course. So I'm a little ahead of you, my dear. But I was. I'm going to say. I forgot what I was going to say, which proves the point. No, but one thing I've been discovering is you've been all of your books are partly memoir, and so I know you've been engaged in this process for a long time. But so I decided, I don't know if it'll ever become a book. I'm calling it writing a memoir, but it's really looking back over my life and pulling out old letters and journals and so on. What I discovered was I realized that, how it is over the years when you're a teacher and speaker and, people ask you for the short form of your life, and how you get here. And I would often say, about my earlier life that when I was married the first time on an Air Force base, and I'd say, I just began to realize that something was calling me and I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wasn't in the right place. And I enlarge that. And then I kind of sketch out the rest of it in those terms, seeking basically. But when I went back and looked at, particularly letters from my mother and from that husband, I realized that, it was a bigger story than that. And I really did hurt people in the process. Yeah. And, that's never part of the story when I tell it, and I felt like nobody understood. But actually, when I look back, my mother understood. She just didn't want me to do that. And so it was very humbling, because I had this story. Right? Now it's a different story. And so I think that, of course, that's the practice of meditation, looking at the stories your mind is making up about who you are. And I could say that always. But I realized, oh, my God, it happens that there's data that says that was not what happened. I would
say, besides meditation, the most important seeking work I have done is the Jungian shadow work. Really looking beyond the nicey nice stories I have told about myself in order to feel good about myself and proceed with my willful little life, and to look like much deeper underground. And I think for feminists, the shadow work is really important, not to put out this assumption, women good, men bad, patriarchy, the problem with everything, women will solve it. Like, we bring our own baggage, we bring our own coping mechanisms and our own way of getting power. Sometimes it's manipulative through the back door, and owning it and owning that we were indeed just as responsible in our first marriages for them failing, in our own ways, and owning it. Why? So that we can really grow and really have our seeking end in finding home. Because those lies we tell about ourselves keep us from home.
Yeah. Wow. That is a gorgeous way to end this conversation. It's so true, because home is, well, my mother used to say home is where the heart is, but home is your inner self. And you can't get there when you're telling yourself lies. It's just not available to you. Yeah, that's really great. So we need many more conversations together.
Whenever you want.
But this one, oh boy, I'm renewed and filled with love for you and everyone, and hope in all the dimensions of hope. And just thank you so much. Thank you for everything you've done, as well as just being you
even
for
all
this
the
hour.
bad things I've done, even all the lies.
That's how we grow.
That's how we grow.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mirabai.